Hi. A lot is spoken about whether we should be listening to our heads or whether we should be listening to our hearts. Should we be living our lives more from our logic, our understanding, our reasoning, or should we be living our lives more from our intuition, our gut reaction, the way that we feel, our emotions? Now, I'm imagining that you probably fall into one or two categories. You're either the sort of person who is a very rational, very logical sort of person that thinks things through carefully and acts according to that. Or you may be the sort of person who is very much governed by your emotions, your intuition, and you act a certain way because you feel that's the way to act. But the reality is that each and every one of us has both of these properties. We all act from both our logic and our intuition. Me personally, I've shared with you before about the fact that I'm a chronic overthinker. In my life, for most of my life, I've thought and thought and thought about things so much that it's almost driven me to distraction, to be honest. But I've found that through being a meditator, meditating every day, and following this pathway, that I'm able to actually free myself from the many, many thoughts that are going around in my head. Because what meditation does is it doesn't take those thoughts away, it doesn't stop the thoughts, but it gives us the ability to be aware of our thoughts, to see the thoughts, to hear the thoughts, to observe them, just like the clouds in the sky, to observe them passing by, but without having to necessarily engage with them. Now, when you are a person whose life is very much logic based, very much a planner, an organizer, to be able to see things from the other side of the coin is a great revelation. It's a brilliant step forward because it helps us to see the bigger picture, if you like. So, a lot of the things that I've learned about in meditation have come from probably the Indian traditions, from Hinduism, Buddhism, the yogic practices. But another school of thought and spiritual practice comes from China and the Taoist way. And the Taoist path tells us that life basically is a flow that we're flowing through, the Tao. And to understand this is to understand that life, the universe, the cosmos, nature, and humanity, we're all in our lives in a constant flow. And as I've mentioned before, if you were to fall into a river, the easiest path, the most sensible path, would be to follow the flow of the river. And life is very much like a flow. We can flow against life. So if life's flowing this way and we're swimming upstream like this, we're expending most of our energy on actually just fighting against the current. Yes, we've got a little bit of movement and a little bit of the ability to steer our path, if you like, but for the most part, we're actually just fighting to keep afloat, fighting against the flow of the current. What the flow state tells us is also a very interesting concept. The flow state is basically the concept that if we are engaged in an activity to which we are particularly adept at, so say for instance I'm a sportsman, yeah, that's a joke, yeah, Johnny the sportsman, that would be a joke. Or I could be a musician, or I could be a chess player, a mathematician, I could be a scientist. But whatever that particular field which I'm particularly gifted at, if you like, particularly able to just perform in that particular path that I know and am used to, when I'm actually engaged in that, I enter into what's known as a flow state. In other words, and I think the term was coined by a basketball player. I think it was, I'm not sure which one, so I'm not going to say. I think it might have been Michael Jordan. But he spoke about being in the zone. And what that zone was for him was that when he was actually playing at his peak, instead of thinking out and turning over the strategies of the game, wanting to perform the best for his team, for his fans and everything else, he literally would enter into a sort of a mental state, or some might call it almost like a heart space, where he actually absolutely flowed with his particular ability, which was basketball. And it got to the point where it was almost impossible for him to miss a shot. If he took a basket, the ball would go in every single time. He was in the flow. He was in the flow state, or as he put it himself, he was in the zone. Now, much as it would be great to live our lives completely in that state, for most of us, we have brief glimpses, brief opportunities to be able to experience the flow state in our lives. But for most of us, most of the time, we're on a journey. Life is a flow. Everything, the plants, the trees, the animals, everything, and ourselves included, are on a flow from our birth all the way through our lives to the end of our lives. We are flowing through life. And life, whether you do anything, whether you act against life, whether you try to manipulate things for your good, or whether you try to plan everything out to the nth degree, which was what I was often guilty of, it doesn't make any difference. Life still flows, life still goes on. The key is to actually get into that state. So back to the head and the heart. In spiritual terms, often I think the consensus has been we don't go with our heads, we go with our heart. We listen to our hearts. And it's very important to do that, to listen to our hearts. But to just only focus on the heart and not focus on the mind and the intellect is to miss out a great big chunk of who we are and what we are. And we've been created with a mind, an analytical brain, for a purpose. And that's what sets us apart from a lot of the animal kingdom, certainly the plant kingdom, is that we're able to analyse things, we're able to look at them, we're able to make decisions about things, weigh things up, if you like. Unfortunately, that often does get out of hand, and we start to believe that ultimately we're in control of the world, the universe, and everything around us. And even the thought that we're in control of our lives is a difficult concept really to come to terms with, because let's face it, 99% of the things that happen to us in our life are not under our control. We don't control the sun coming up, we don't control the seasons, we don't control the weather, we don't control even our own bodies, how the excuse me, how the organs function, how our skin regenerates itself, how our hair grows, our nails, our immune system, the muscles, the blood flow, the lymphatic system. None of these things are working under our mental control. Now, each part of the body has its own intelligence. Every cell, science now understands, every cell in the body has its own inherent intelligence, and cells communicate with each other, organs communicate with each other, bodily systems flow in sync with one another, and the human body is an amazing piece of equipment, machinery if you like, of which we only have a very small amount of control. So take something like the breath. I can hold my breath and release my breath at will. But if I don't think about it, and if I don't concentrate on it, guess what? I continue to breathe. I don't stop breathing. And there is an inherent intelligence in the body that's subconscious. We don't have any control over it. So you could sort of say, well, we don't really need to necessarily engage the brain, engage the mind. But if we were to just literally flow, just not to make any decisions about anything, just go through life completely on our gut reaction, completely on just making a kind of an instinctive reaction to things, we'd be a little bit like a boat that's going down the river that doesn't have any control, has no rudder, has no control, is not being steered. So there's a difference between swimming upstream and swimming downstream, but there's also a difference between flowing with the flow of the river and actually utilising the rudder, the control, to guide us one way or another. And that's where our mind comes in. Now, for me, meditation has brought some wonderful benefits to my mind, as well as just my intuition, my gut reaction. So to talk about the gut reaction and the intuition, when we quieten the mind and the thoughts we're observing, but not reacting to every single thought that comes in the head, that's a great skill to learn. And that's something that meditation certainly brings to light. We start to recognise the fact that other messages are coming to us, but not necessarily in the same way as the thoughts that come into our heads. We have feelings, we have emotions, we will have a gut reaction to things that happen. We'll walk into a room, we'll sense an atmosphere maybe, we'll go to do something, to make a decision, and then something will check in our hearts, and we'll think, don't quite feel happy about making that decision, even though everything in our logic might tell us that something is the right thing to do. When we start to hear and listen to our intuition, we'll often be pulled back, and we'll get that stop sign that says, okay, no. The other side of that coin is logic might tell us that to do a particular thing, to take a particular step, leap of faith if you like, to make a big change in our life. Logic sometimes tells us, no, don't do it, go with what you know, stick with the logical thing, this doesn't make any sense. But I'm sure you've all been in that position where, in spite of logic, in spite of how things seem on the surface, your intuition, your gut reaction tells you this is the thing, this is what you need to do, follow this. Through meditation, still in the mind, that voice, that other side, that other guidance in our life, as the third eye chakra begins to open, we start to receive more intuition. We start to understand that more clearly. The difference is there has to be a balance between our mental process and our intuition and our heart. And this is how we actually flow through life. So we flow in the direction that life's taking us. We will have intuition that tells us whether we should do one thing or another. We also have a mind and intellect. And with meditation, the benefit for the intellect is that by getting rid of, stripping back all of the unwanted thoughts, all of the mental chatter, the monkey mind, we're actually able to focus on the proper logical thoughts. We're actually able to see the big picture, and we're actually able to focus in on particular things that we need to focus our brains on. The mind is a fantastic computer. You know, it's better than any computer that's ever been designed in the worlds of IT or whatever. There's never been anything as complex or as sophisticated as the human mind. And the human brain is changing, adapting, evolving all the time based on what we do. And we have uploads of information, we're downloading information from it, we have vast memory banks that store all sorts of information. So I think what I'm trying to say to you today is life is a balance. The right way for us to live our lives as spiritual beings is to certainly be in the flow of life, certainly to flow with the way life is taking us. But it's not wrong to have a certain amount of direction, a certain amount of control, if you like, over things that are happening. And we see this in the creative process. We are creators. We have the ability to create. And when we tap into that sacral chakra, which is the seat of our creative energy, creative power, we flow with that. But in creating, we engage with both the intuition, which gives us the power to use senses that are beyond our normal 5 senses of sight, sound, touch, taste and smell. We're able to intuit much deeper things, but at the same time then we also, after having developed our minds and training our minds and our awareness, are able to intelligently move through life and make those decisions that will bring that creative energy into play to actually create the things, to actually create bring the desires of our hearts into manifestation. So I hope that helps, guys. That's just my little take. There's far more to this, and I certainly would like to look more into more of the philosophies. And again, it's the balance between the knowledge that we have, the information that we have, because people have studied these things for thousands of years, and we can benefit from their knowledge. And we're in an age of where information is readily available, which is a good thing. Obviously, the downside of that is we're bombarded with information that, for a lot of it, is absolutely useless and pointless. You know, just scrolling through our phones, scrolling through TikTok and Instagram for, 2-3 second hits of dopamine. Is it really going to gain us anything in our lives? Certainly not spiritually, but not in a practical sense either. I'm not talking about entertainment. I'm talking about us living our lives to our full potential, to actually become the people that we're meant to be, to find our true life's purpose, why we're here, and then to actually flow with our life's purpose. So, listen to your heart and listen to your head as well. They're both essentials for navigating the flow of life. Thank you, and I'll speak to you very soon. Namaskaram.